Who the fuck are you?
Death.
Please, don't do it, please. Please.
The film opens with a woman making her way to her car in a dimly lit underground parking garage, only to discover that it won't start. As she assesses the situation, she notices a masked man in the distance, and suddenly, he is joined by two more men. Despite her attempts to start the car, it remains unresponsive. The men appear to vanish momentarily, allowing her a brief moment of relief. However, this is short-lived as they re-emerge and begin assaulting her vehicle with crowbars. They manage to breach the car and forcibly remove the screaming woman. Just as they begin to tear her clothing, Kersey intervenes. Paul confronts the assailants, declaring himself as death before fatally shooting the first two men. He pursues the remaining injured individual, who finds himself trapped in a dead end. The man pleads for his life, but Paul ultimately shoots him as well. Upon inspecting the body, Paul is taken aback to see his own face. He then awakens from this nightmare, drenched in sweat. The following day, Paul's stepdaughter Erica visits him at his office, eager to share her new drawings. Although he notices that she seems somewhat anxious, Erica insists that she is fine. Paul receives a call from Karen, Erica's mother and a reporter at a local news station. That evening, the family gathers for dinner, but Erica's boyfriend Randy arrives to take her out, prompting Karen to insist that Erica return home by 11 p.m. As Paul observes through the window, he sees Randy hand Erica a cigarette before they drive away. The young couple arrives at a local arcade filled with unsavory characters. Inside, they encounter a dealer named Jojo, with whom Randy engages in a transaction. Jojo takes an interest in the unsuspecting Erica and leads her into another room under the pretense of conversation, offering her a bag of nuts that he claims is something special. Meanwhile, at home, Paul and Karen are preparing to go out for a movie. Paul expresses concern about Erica's relationship with Randy, however, Karen reassures him of Randy's good academic standing. Before they can leave, they receive an urgent phone call and rush to a nearby hospital, where they learn that Erica has suffered a drug overdose. They arrive just in time to witness the medical team desperately attempting to revive her, but tragically, she succumbs on the operating table. Karen is left devastated by the loss of her daughter. Without delay, Paul decides to follow Randy one evening as he makes his way to the arcade. Inside, Paul witnesses Randy confronting Jojo, who subsequently takes him outside. Angered by Erica's death, Randy threatens to report Jojo to the police. However, Jojo unexpectedly stabs him, resulting in Randy's death. Paul then confronts Jojo, who attempts to flee to the rooftops, but Paul successfully shoots him before he can escape. The following day, Sergeant Reiner speaks with a witness who identified Paul's car and provides a description to the detective, prompting Detective Phil to investigate further. Upon returning home, Paul discovers an envelope at his door containing the message, "I know who you are." He then receives a phone call from the sender, who refuses to disclose their identity and threatens to contact the police unless they meet. A limousine is waiting at his gate, and the driver instructs Paul to get inside. He is taken to an opulent mansion where he meets Nathan White, a wealthy tabloid publisher. Although initially skeptical, Paul learns that Nathan wants to hire him to eliminate someone. While gazing at a painting of his wife and daughter, Nathan recounts how his daughter fell into drug addiction and ultimately died from an overdose. He has invested significant resources in gathering intelligence on the city's gangs and offers Paul financial compensation, firearms, and access to all his resources to eradicate them. Paul expresses interest but requests a few days to consider the proposal. Later, Paul and Karen attend Erica's funeral, during which Karen blames herself for not being able to save her daughter. Witnessing Karen's distress fuels Paul's anger, leading him to blame the city and its gangsters for their misfortunes. At work, Karen expresses her desire to write about the drug crisis affecting the city. However, her boss dismisses her idea, arguing that even affluent individuals use drugs and would have little interest in such a topic. Despite her boss's reluctance, Karen remains determined, and he ultimately agrees to let her pursue the story while cautioning her to exercise care. She visits the morgue, determined to view all the bodies associated with drug-related incidents. and is taken aback to discover that they are all young individuals. Subsequently, she heads to the arcade and displays cash to a dealer in hopes of obtaining information about the streets. The dealer agrees to provide insights but demands additional payment. Nathan informs Paul about two gangs that dominate the drug trade, one led by a man named Ed and the other by brothers Jack and Tony, who are currently engaged in conflict. Paul has resolved to undertake the mission, prompting Nathan to direct him to a contact for procuring weapons. Meanwhile, Detective Phil has uncovered that the bullets recovered from JoJo's case and those from a similar incident 2 years prior match those linked to the Vigilante. In light of this information, Sergeant Reiner decides to pay Paul a visit. The two officers question Paul regarding his activities and whereabouts on the night of JoJo's murder, but Paul asserts that he was home alone at the time. The officers depart, intending to conduct further investigations into Paul's background. Paul's initial target on Nathan's behalf is Ed, who is celebrating his birthday at his mansion. Paul successfully infiltrates the party by posing as a waiter. Jack and Tony also arrive at the event, appearing to be on friendly terms with Ed. While inside the mansion, Paul discreetly plants listening devices in Ed's phones but must conceal himself when Ed, Jack, and Tony enter to discuss business matters. Ed questions whether the brothers were involved in JoJo's death, but they vehemently deny any wrongdoing, expressing their desire to maintain the delicate peace between their factions. Ed then calls upon one of his subordinates, Vincent, and brutally stabs him to death for stealing from him. The individuals soon discover Paul in hiding, but he asserts that he is merely taking a restroom break. Ed opts not to eliminate Paul and instead instructs him to assist in disposing of the body, while signaling to his subordinate to kill Paul once they have finished. Paul consents and aids in transporting the body to a vehicle but seizes the opportunity to attack the subordinate and escapes the premises. He subsequently tracks down Ed's associates to a restaurant, utilizing knowledge of their fondness for wine to craft an explosive disguised as a wine bottle. Paul prepares the bomb inside his vehicle before entering the restaurant with it concealed in a briefcase. In proximity to the men, Paul feigns representation of a wine company and offers the bartender a complimentary sample. The bartender enjoys it, prompting Paul to extend the offer to the gang members. He presents them with the bottle, but one gangster expresses suspicion, believing he has seen Paul previously. The group hastily vacates the room just before the bomb detonates, resulting in the deaths of all three men. Ed receives news of the incident and suspects that the brothers are attempting to betray him. Paul's next target is an associate of the brothers, a man with an extensive criminal history but no convictions. He locates this dangerous individual at a video rental store where he operates a clandestine business. Paul infiltrates the establishment armed with a submachine gun fitted with a silencer. He confronts the gangster and fatally shoots him, effortlessly dispatching his two accomplices as well. The news of these attacks reaches the brothers, who also suspect that Ed is plotting against them. Paul then sets his sights on the brothers' top hitman, Frank Boogs, who resides in an upscale condominium. Frank and his companion are preparing for an evening out, oblivious to Paul's surveillance. After they leave, Paul picks the locks to their apartment and gains entry. Frank retrieves his tickets after realizing he left them behind and returns to the building. While bugging Frank's phone, Paul hears the door open. Frank enters, sensing something amiss, and draws his weapon as he begins to search the apartment. He eventually encounters Paul, who disarms him and attempts to flee. However, Frank apprehends Paul and assaults him. Paul regains his composure, strikes Frank's head against a cabinet, and ultimately throws him over the balcony. Reiner and Phil, who have been monitoring Frank, witness his fall to his death. Reiner rushes up to the apartment while Phil notices Paul leaving the building and getting into his car. However, Phil misleads Reiner by claiming he saw no one. A few days later, Nathan directs Paul to travel to San Pedro, where a local fisherman's wharf serves as a front for Ed's drug operations. Paul seamlessly integrates himself with the group of men returning from their lunch break while searching for the drug operation. He catches the attention of one of the men, who confronts him. Paul quickly incapacitates the man and discovers a large-scale drug operation, where a solitary guard is stationed at the entrance. Approaching the guard under the pretense of being lost, Paul uses his toolkit to knock him out. Upon entering, Paul observes several individuals unpacking drugs concealed within fish and processing them. When one man unexpectedly encounters Paul, he shoots him dead. Paul then opens fire on the entire room, eliminating multiple targets in a barrage of bullets. The alarm is raised throughout the factory as workers scramble to locate Paul. In preparation for his escape, he sets an explosive device and leaves it behind. Surrounded by nearly all the factory personnel, Paul manages to detonate the explosives, prompting the men to dive for cover. Seizing this moment, he fights off several attackers until he reaches a truck and makes a swift getaway. Meanwhile, Detective Phil reveals himself to be a double agent, planning to inform Ed about Paul Kersey's identity. Ed demands to know who Paul is working for and instructs Phil to uncover this information and subsequently eliminate Paul. Despite Phil's insistence that he is not a killer, Ed remains resolute. Later that night, Paul is at his office when Detective Phil arrives under the guise of following up on a case. As Phil casually draws his weapon, he questions Paul about his affiliations. However, Paul refuses to disclose any information. In response, Phil aims his gun slowly, but Paul reacts by shooting him from beneath the table, resulting in Phil's death. Reiner learns of Phil's demise and speculates that it occurred due to Phil discovering the identity of the vigilante. He suspects Paul Kersey and seeks a warrant for his arrest. Simultaneously, Ed becomes aware of Phil's death and suspects that both he and the brothers are being manipulated against one another. He contacts the brothers to arrange a meeting. Throughout this time, Paul overhears their entire conversation. The two gangs convene on the outskirts of town, each side harboring suspicions about the other. From a distance, Paul observes with his weapon ready. As Ed and Jack meet in the center, Ed attempts to express his concerns, but Tony accuses him of lying. Tension escalates when Paul shoots Jack in the arm, igniting a shootout between the factions. Amidst the chaos, Jack is killed in a hail of gunfire. As Ed tries to flee with his men, he finds himself abandoned due to his slow pace. Paul then approaches Ed with his gun drawn. Despite Ed's attempts to crawl away, he cannot escape his fate. Paul presents him with a photograph of Erica before shooting Ed in the heart, resulting in his death. Upon returning to the station, Reiner receives instructions from his superior to cease any further pursuit of Paul, as resources were misallocated to him instead of monitoring the two gangs that recently engaged in a violent confrontation. Nathan contacts Paul to congratulate him on the success of his mission and arranges a meeting, providing his location. Paul drives to the specified address, where he finds a limousine awaiting him. After entering the vehicle, he discovers that Nathan is absent, and the driver departs. Unable to open the locked doors, Paul shoots out a window and escapes just before the car erupts in flames. Subsequently, Paul proceeds to Nathan's residence and confronts the doorman at gunpoint. He is escorted to an elderly man claiming to be Nathan White, who is not the individual with whom Paul made a deal. The genuine Nathan reveals that he has been away for 3 months, leading Paul to realize he has been deceived. While returning home, Paul is stopped by a squad car, searched, and arrested by 2 officers under suspicion of murder. During transport, Paul becomes aware that they are heading in the wrong direction and suspects that the officers may not be legitimate. He engages the 2 men in a struggle, causing the vehicle to flip over. Paul quickly regains composure and frees himself from his handcuffs. Arming himself with a weapon, he escapes as sirens wail in the distance. Meanwhile, the impersonator chastises one of the officers for allowing Paul's escape and reveals himself as a third drug lord who manipulated Kersey to eliminate his rivals. He is determined to kill Paul to erase any evidence of his involvement and devises a plan. Karen is at work when she receives a call from her drug contact regarding insider information and plans to meet up, unaware that it is a trap. Later that evening, as Karen exits her apartment, she is forcibly taken by a man who drags her into a van that speeds away. Paul returns home only to be confronted at gunpoint by Reiner, who disarms him and threatens revenge for Phil's death. Paul explains to Reiner that Phil was working for the gangsters and had attempted to kill him. During their conversation, Paul receives a call from Karen, who expresses her fear. The impersonator demands a meeting for an exchange involving Karen. Seizing the opportunity, Paul knocks Reiner unconscious and discovers a hidden cache of weapons and explosives, arming himself for the imminent confrontation. He drives to the designated meeting spot in an underground parking lot. From a distance, men in a car signal for Paul to approach. As Paul's vehicle nears, the men ambush him and open fire, only to realize that the car is empty. In response, Paul fires an explosive round, killing several assailants and detonating the impersonator's vehicle as the driver attempts to flee. Ultimately, only the impersonator and 1 gangster remain, retreating into a skating rink where additional members of their crew are waiting. He instructs his team to be on the lookout for Kersey, while the imposter Nathan targets Karen. The men soon spot Paul, leading to a shootout that creates chaos within the rink. Paul skillfully neutralizes the attacking individuals with his rifle. Observing the imposter Nathan fleeing the scene with Karen as his hostage, Kersey pursues them. The two confront each other in the midst of the foggy skating rink, where the imposter warns Paul to stay back or he will harm Karen. After dispatching his last assailant, Paul seizes the opportunity to advance, but the imposter Nathan escapes the building. Karen attempts to resist the imposter, but he ruthlessly shoots her down amidst a barrage of bullets. Devastated by her death, Paul retaliates by firing an explosive round at the imposter, obliterating him. Reiner then arrives on the scene, aiming his weapon at Paul, but Paul responds defiantly, telling him to proceed as he wishes. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.